So we were discussing honoring our parents, and we got into a lot of interesting details and questions and step parents and calling them by their name and all these different things that are really, really part of the obligation of honoring our parents. Now, children have this tremendous burden, this tremendous responsibility to honor their parents. Parents are not supposed to be burdensome about it, not supposed to be too exacting in their honor. Like, don't make a situation where your kid's for sure going to fail. We're supposed to sort of forgive our kids and not look too closely sometimes. Again, that does not mean crossing any obvious lines, like we're talking about calling people by their first name or things like that. But in the details, if they're not exactly as they should be, don't look too closely. Let it go, let it pass. In other words, God's perspective, the Torah's perspective, Judaism's perspective is children should feel enormously the need to honor their parents, and parents should not be exacting in their honor. From the child's end, we should give. From the parents' end, we shouldn't be so demanding to make, not, God forbid, create difficulties for our children. Because, of course, if we are demanding and the children don't live up to it, it's going to be a problem for them. Negativity will happen if there's this negative energy of, oh, this child is not honoring me properly. Oh, and then we're going to, God forbid, draw down negative energy on our child, which we would not want to do. So therefore, children, in our role as children, tremendously honor our parents. In our role as parents, we could be a little lenient or relaxed in terms of the honor we expect from our children. Now, if there ever is a case of a conflict between the parents and God always comes first. Meaning if they would be like, the parent will want you to do something, but God doesn't allow that, then the honor for God comes before the honor for the parent. And if there's any conflict in terms of like where to learn or moving to Israel or something like that, which would be considered like, oh, like it would be a godly thing to move to Israel, but your parents don't want. So you'd be going against your parents if you moved to Israel. Yeah, but God would want, so that's okay. Or, oh, you would rather learn in this place that you feel would be better for your spiritual development, but your parents don't want. Oh, well, God comes first, and then that's okay, and you're actually supposed to do it anyway. Of course, respectfully. My husband, when he was a child, he wanted to learn in a Chabad religious school, Chabad high school. This is, I guess he was like somewhat after his bar mitzvah. Maybe he was 14, maybe he was 15 at the time. And his parents weren't so wild about it. But he and his father went to the rabbi to educate this conflict. And the rabbi said, yeah, a child's supposed to learn where he will learn the best. If he wants to learn with Chabad, that's where he's supposed to go. So that was, so to speak, putting God first. But my husband, being respectful to his father, tried to pick among all the Chabad schools one that he felt his father would be most comfortable with. No, he didn't have to. According to the law, he could have just picked the one he wanted best because, hey, the law's in his favor here. He doesn't have to listen to his father. He has to listen to what God is saying about his education. But still, he was respectful. And therefore, from all of his options, he picked the school that he knew would be the easiest for his father to be comfortable for him to be there. If a person is talking to their parent and they're gossiping, well, God doesn't want you to gossip. Well, you're supposed to be respectful to your parent. What are you supposed to do? So you have to think of a way to get off the phone or to change the subject that's polite, that's respectful, that's not rude. You're not supposed to gossip. Put that first, but do it in a way that doesn't diminish your parents' honor. Like basically honor God, but be polite. Any questions or any thoughts on any of this? Okay, well, the question is, what if your parents aren't so healthy? How do you honor unhealthy parents? And what we're told is, if that's the case, to create healthy boundaries so you and your children don't get hurt. And within those boundaries, give as much honor as possible, but not putting yourself in a position that would be emotionally harmful to you or to your spouse or to your children. You want to take care of your parents' needs as much as possible within those boundaries. Maybe you can't call, you can't visit. That would be too toxic, too difficult. Okay, you can't, don't. But then send email, send texts, send WhatsApps, send pictures of grandchildren or great-grandchildren that will bring them joy. If you can't have a real relationship, you can try to forge a virtual relationship. So basically, yes, you are supposed to protect yourself and your spouse and your children. At the same time, within that paradigm, try to honor your parent or parents. Sometimes, as a child, a person suffered from their parents and they don't want a relationship with their parents at all. They don't want no real relationship and no virtual relationship. I had a situation with a woman who was physically abused by her parents, completely cut off all relationship with them. And now as an adult and mother herself of a daughter who's already in her early 20s, somewhere around there, now for totally different reasons, this daughter suddenly cut off a relationship with her. And it's like, it's a little too close for comfort. You cut off relationship from very abusive parents. And now your daughter has cut off her relationship from very loving parents. What's going on here? So I think in such a situation, obviously God's giving you a message. Obviously you have to do something to change what you've been doing until now, even though there was a lot of validation for what you've been doing until now. One thing is, I think, to understand parents as real people. You know, when we're a child, parents aren't real people. And when we become an adult, sometimes we have to relook at them as the real people they are. And like in this woman's case, yes, your parents failed you, but you're an adult. You could view them as people with their own traumas, with their own abuses, with their own pain on so many levels, including on how they ruined their relationship with their children. That's one point that I think is very important. And when a person does this, this will lead to a feeling of real compassion for them, intense compassion for them, which then hopefully would lead to step 3, to be able to stretch to find somewhere, somehow, the ability to have some type of relationship. And whatever you're thinking you can do, try to up it by 1. Meaning, you could say, this is my max. Once a month, I'm going to send them a good Shabbos message. Okay, let's up it. Let's try to do it once every 3 weeks. Whenever God looks at us, God knows our max. God knows when we're doing our most. And when we push a little beyond that, it has tremendous value. It's tremendously powerful to God. This is discussed in Tanya. If you remember, we learned that several years ago, where it speaks about the difference between a worker for God and a non-worker for God. And we spoke then, or in the Talmud, it speaks of the students of those days. The students of those days are nothing like my students, because the students of those days, everything they learned, they would review 100 times. Everything. Each person was a walking Torah scroll. Each person was a repository of all of Torah. And they acquired this by reviewing everything literally, not figuratively, not in a big number we're saying 100. No, literally 1 time, 5 times, 7 times, 13 times, all the way to 100 times. And that was their norm. So the Talmud says that someone who reviews his learning 100 times is a non-worker. We're like, a non-worker, my gosh, if my students review something 3 times, I'd be happy. Yeah, but these people are used to reviewing it 100 times. That's their norm. That's a non-worker. So what's a worker? The Talmud says a worker is if someone reviews it 101 times. So you could say, 1 more time makes such a difference? I mean, it's just 1 more time. But it makes such a difference because it's going past your max, past your norm, past what you've habituated yourself to. And this is true with everything in our life. Everything in our life. When we whatever we're doing for God, and all of us are doing different things, and all of us have different things God is expecting from us and is hoping that we'll do for him, needing that we'll do for him. But wherever we're holding on our ladder, when we're at our 100, our good norm, our what we view as max norm, and we push even a little bit, it totally transforms the whole. In the Talmud, when discussing it, it gives a parable of a rent-a-donkey market where, of course, they didn't have rent-a-car in those days. They had rent-a-donkey. And you rented a donkey for 1 coin, 1 zuz, the coins of those days, for the donkey to walk 10 Persian miles. If you said, I need 11 to get where I'm going, then the rental price was doubled. You had to give 2 zuz if you wanted that donkey to walk 11 miles. Like imagine if you're renting the car and it's, $57 for 1 day, great deal. But they say, oh no, that's only to go from here to here. You want to go further? We're doubling it. That's exactly what would happen in those days. You want 11 miles? We're doubling it. 2 zuz. Well, why? So one of the commentators on the Talmud says, because for the donkey to walk that 11th mile, he has to walk faster all day. I mean, meaning in those days, you walked from sunbreak to sundown. You can't go in the dark. So the first moment of dawn, you're on the road, you hit the road, and you have to stop when it's dark. And that's about 10 Persian miles. You want this donkey to walk 11 miles? You're going to be pushing him hard all day. That's why we're charging you double money. You're going to exhaust our donkey. And that is spiritually what happens to us. When we push ourselves past what we determined was our limit, it's like from that 10th to the 11th mile, from reviewing the learning 100 times to 101 times. And it spiritually changes not just that plus one more mile, plus 1 more time of learning. No, it spiritually changes the entire whole, that this is plus. So when a person is looking at what could I do, then you say, all right, this is what I think I can do. I'm going to do a little more than I think I can do. That's the +1 factor. That makes it very, 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 very powerful for God. That's a huge, 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 huge stretch. I don't know if anyone can think of times when they've done this, when they've really pushed themselves and really said, okay, God, I know what I'm capable of, but I'm going to give you more. I know what I can do. I can't do this. This is beyond my pay grade completely. But I'm pretty desperate, or I'm pretty inspired, or whatever other reason, I will give you more. And really, when they did that, felt different, felt a stretch completely. Anyone had any experience like that? I guess no one's thinking of something. Maybe it's hard to remember, or maybe it's personal, but it is very powerful. So if you haven't, and don't think you've ever tried this for God, it's worth trying. Just like thinking, what can I do that's past what I think I'm able to do? Let me try it. Let me go past my limits. Let me give God beyond what I think I can and see what happens. Because it's a very transformative experience. And I have had these experiences, and very, very transformative. So we're talking about parents, going back to what we were saying, a parent that was really, really unhealthy, an abusive parent. Not like you didn't have the best relationship with them, but far, far more than that. Is there an obligation to mourn for an abusive parent? Meaning, we have an obligation to mourn for our parents. There is no one we have to mourn for as much as our parents. Anyone else beyond our parents that we have to mourn for, which would be a spouse or a sibling or a child, The mourning is for 1 month. For a parent, it's a year. You say, what? You mourn more for your parents than God forbid for your child? And the answer is yes. Yes. You'll only have one mother your entire life. You'll only have one father your entire life. That relationship can never be duplicated. And you can say, well, I didn't have the best relationship with my mother or with my father. Okay, that's possible. But that doesn't take away the facts. There's nothing like a mother. There's nothing like a father. And therefore, we do have this special mourning for them that is unique. I said, not like a sibling, not like a spouse, not like a child, just your parents. So what if there was a really, not great relationship, no relationship, but really real abuse? Someone that really suffered from an abusive parent. And mourning would almost be like a trigger of a lot of that pain. So that at that point, we are told that we should speak to a rabbi and discuss it and have a rabbi's guidance, because in such an issue, the laws might be different. Meaning, in a regular, healthy situation, there's a week of mourning, which we call Shiva. Then there's the benchmark of 30 days from the passing, called Shloshim. And then there's another 11 months after that, because there's 12 months of mourning for a parent uniquely. There's Kaddish through 11 months and annually on the yahrzeit. So all of those things we're supposed to do, even if we didn't have the best relationship with our parent. But if, God forbid, there was something like real abuse, the child might not be required to do these things, and one would speak to a rabbi for guidance. Any questions? Any thoughts on any of this? This honoring of our parents, we're told, is really a muscle. This developing this muscle of honor for our relationship with God. And it's not only our parents. There are a number of people that we are told, according to Jewish thought, Jewish law, we must give honor to. Anyone know other people besides our parents we're supposed to honor?
Parents-in-law.
Parents-in-law, yes. Anyone else? Any other
Teachers.
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 Teachers, yes.
Aunts.
Aunts, interesting. No, not specifically aunts. I mean, if one's a child, there's, I guess, this general concept of an adult, but speaking to adults, yes, as Rachel said, in-laws. As Chava said, teachers. Anyone else that we know we're supposed to honor according to Torah?
Rabbis.
Rabbis. Chava's on a roll. Rabbis, yes. Teachers, rabbis, in-laws.
Any older person?
Well, not any older person. We're supposed to give them respect, but to honor, not any. We are supposed to give respect to the elderly, but to really, what we're told, honor. I mean, maybe you could say any older person. We are supposed to give a certain amount of respect to any older person. Grandparents. Just as we have to honor parents, we have to honor grandparents. Now, for some grandchildren, honoring grandparents is so much easier than honoring parents. Grandparents give us, it's just like a love fest relationship, so none of the complications of our parents. So it's easier or not. And also we're told any spiritual mentors, meaning, well, this person's not exactly your rabbi, they're not exactly your teacher, but they are a spiritual guide for you. Such a person also you're obligated to honor. And I think I will take what Rachel said, though I wasn't thinking of it as any elderly person, because that is true. There is a certain amount of honor we are supposed to give to the elderly. All of these people, beyond our parents, of course, is the most, but teachers, rabbis, mentors, grandparents, in-laws, all of this is helping really our muscle of ultimately honoring and revering God. Now, sometimes people find that it's easier for them to honor their parents than for any of these other categories. Does anyone find that any of these other types of people I listed, teachers or rabbis or spiritual mentors or grandparents or in-laws, does anyone find that they have a greater challenge honoring them than honoring parents?
So maybe you can give an example. What does it mean, honor teacher or rabbi or mentor?
Um, well, that's an interesting question. What would it mean? How would you translate that? Because there's many things we're told very specifically about parents that
Right.
really seem to be very specific to parents. Like when a parent walks into a room, you should stand up and you wouldn't sit down, you wouldn't start eating before them. You would, those are sort of very specific to parents. I don't think necessarily to that degree we have to honor the rabbi or the teacher or the mentor. So that's an excellent question, Chava. I don't know if it's specifically delineated because with parents it is very delineated, but it always is with parents. That could probably also extend to in-laws, those laws, or as we said, step parents for sure during the lifetime of your parent. After the lifetime is just considered like very, 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 very special. But during the lifetime, that would be more obligatory. But for a rabbi or a teacher or a mentor, I don't know. I'm trying to think how you would describe giving honor when you're giving honor to someone and being respectful and treating them in a different fashion that you would treat someone else, not treating them as like, yeah, my casual, my this, my that, but like really giving them honor. I don't know. That's not a very good answer, Hava, and I am sorry. Someone give better answers than that? Anyone have ideas, situations they've been in where they felt like they did this to honor a rabbi or a teacher or a grandparent or someone like that?
I've seen, actually, I was at the wedding recently, which wasn't Chabad wedding, and when the rabbi
Everyone stood
walked,
up.
everyone stood up.
Yes.
I don't see that very often in my life, so that kind of like made an impression on me.
Yes, that is a very yes, that I was like, "Oh yeah, that, of course." Yes, that is something that people definitely do. Like if a rabbi is called up at a wedding, it's very obvious because suddenly everyone's sitting and suddenly everyone stands. But standing to give honor, by the same token, like if a teacher walks into the room, the class is supposed to stand up, or if a principal walked into the room or something like that, you would expect the class to stand up. If a rabbi walked into the room, the people sitting would stand up. That would be like a very simple expression of yes, we're standing up, we're giving them honor. I was thinking like sort of, obviously this is the ultimate example, but thinking of when the Rebbe would walk into 770 and when the Lubavitcher would walk in and there was like, it's a lot of people and a lot of people make a lot of noise. And suddenly the Rebbe walks in and it's like completely quiet. And you're talking at peak season, masses and masses of people, like no way for no sardine to fit in. And suddenly as the Rebbe walks in, and I don't know how they did it, I'm above watching, suddenly like there's like a parting, like the parting of the water, splitting of the sea. There's literally somehow, I don't know, suddenly there's this clear road for the Rebbe to walk between the people and walk up to the front of the synagogue. And then when the Rebbe goes to the front, then suddenly, as soon as the Rebbe passes, suddenly all the people merge again, and it's impossible to envision there was ever that space, but there was. It's interesting because actually, it says like about the rabbi that there's two versions. Some that he enters last and leaves first, which is what the Rebbe would do, and some that like he would enter first and leave last. I guess it depends on different situations. But yeah, that you would definitely, it's very palpable, that that level of honor, of awe, of feeling the presence, feeling the power, feeling the godliness. But for a regular person, it's not as intense, but definitely it's there. Anyone finding it has found challenges in this? Like for my parents, I have no problem honoring them. This is my parents. But for other people, it's hard for me.
I wish when my parents were alive that I knew that, and I would be doing more than I did. But for rabbis, it just comes natural.
I think for a lot of people that have challenge, the biggest challenge is usually with their in-laws, from what I've seen. Obviously, some people do have challenges with rabbis or teachers or people like that. But, it depends. Maybe situational, specific. But for a lot of people, they have problems with in-laws because sometimes it's not an easy relationship. Sometimes it's a beautiful, blessed relationship. I'm blessed. I have a wonderful, wonderful mother-in-law. That's very easy to do whatever I can for her. And I try. But a lot of people have challenges in that area. A lot of times the relationship with in-laws is not easy. And sometimes it's not coming from you. It's coming from the mother-in-law or the father-in-law. So it is sometimes very hard to really give honor when they feel such stress and strain in that relationship. But it is something that God really wants. And I'm sure your spouse really wants it as well. But we are really told as we honor our parents, we really have to honor in-laws. And during our parents' lifetime, we have to give honor to step-parents as well. So I don't know if anyone was challenged in that, and if they did it, they figured out great solutions to overcome that. I don't know if that was anyone's experience here. As parents, it's really important to teach these things to our children, even when our children are adults. But for sure, of course, when they're children, to teach our children that they're supposed to honor teachers, they're supposed to honor rabbis, they're supposed to honor spiritual mentors, they're supposed to honor parents, they're supposed to honor grandparents, they're supposed to honor in-laws, and really to explain to our children, and when they're adults, the explanation might sound a little different than when they're children, but really explaining that this is a vehicle that God gave us to enable us to strengthen ourselves in this area, to truly honor and revere God. And of course, the more our children, including our adult children, see us honoring our parents, even when it's difficult, our in-laws, even when it's difficult, rabbis, teachers, mentors, the more natural it is for them. This is, of course, not only true with honor, it's true with everything. This week's Torah portion, it speaks of the concept of some commandments being like engraved in us. Let me backtrack a little. This week actually has two Torah portions, Bahar and Bechukosai. So the second one, Bechukosai means a chok. A chok means a law we don't know the reason for. But a chok also means something that's engraved, like the tablets. The tablets weren't written, it wasn't ink on parchment, they were engraved letters. So we have a lot of different relationships with different ways we serve God, with different commandments. And some things we do and we're doing it, and then we could stop doing it. I have the connection stops. Situational. Where am I holding? What's going on in my life? But some parts of our relationship to God is like a choik, bichukosai, chakika. That's the Hebrew word for it. It means engraved. Engraved means no matter what's going on, I'm not stopping. I can't stop this. And those areas of who we are that are just engraved in us, that we can't stop no matter what, that is almost like the natural gift we give our children. Those things we have so strongly, and even if they're adult children, they still pick up. They see, can't go there, can't touch there. That's you, absolutely. And it really makes a deep impression. This past Friday was Lag BaOmer, a very joyous, special day, very special energy on the Jewish calendar. And I'm going to share a little story about Lag BaOmer that connects a little bit to this idea. This was right after the Holocaust. And many of the children survivors that were survivors and soul survivors, when they got to Israel, they were sent to the kibbutzim in Israel, where they became part of the kibbutz philosophy, and very, very, very quickly dropped or were taken away from them whatever relationships they had with God that they had before and had somehow survived the Holocaust. So one such child, when he came to the kibbutz and he said, what was his name? And he said his name, his first name was Banish. I forget his second name, something like Scheinfeld. I don't remember exactly. We'll say Scheinfeld. He said Banish Scheinfeld. So right away, of course, in the kibbutz, they say, oh, well, let's make that like modern and Israeli. We don't want to call you Banish. Let's call you Dove. And Scheinfeld, that sounds so European. Let's call you like Sheleg. We're going to call you Dove Sheleg. And he said, no, my name is Banish Scheinfeld. They're like, no. I mean, Israel, that worked in Europe. No, nobody here is no Banish and no Scheinfeld. We're going to call you Dove Sheleg. And he said, I have to do this. He started to cry. He said, this was like one of my last memories. I think my last memory of my father was him telling me, this is your name and always be Banish Scheinfeld because that's going to continue our family. You're the only one that's going to keep up our family's name. I can't drop it. So whoever was doing the intake, as we'll call it on the kibbutz, said, okay, no problem. It could be Banish. So he stayed Banish Scheinfeld. But besides that, he became totally absorbed in the kibbutz culture, of course, became like everyone else, completely secular, and lived a life. Got married, had a job, had children, lived in a suburb of Tel Aviv. He lived in Ramat Aviv. And he actually reached age of retirement so many years later. Now he's 60 plus years old, no child anymore. He's retired. And he starts finding, like other retirees, he has time on his hands. He starts doing things he couldn't do all of his years. And he starts taking trips, going on tours around Israel. And he was on a tour in the north. And the tour guide said, we're very near this very holy religious Jewish site called Meron. Meron is where tens and hundreds of thousands come on Lag BaOmer to celebrate, to come to the resting site of the great, great sage, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. This is the day of his passing. And it's worthwhile to stop and look. Like, it'll be an interesting tourist site. So the tour guide, totally secular, the group, totally secular, they come to Meron. Check it out, see what the natives are doing. And this man, in his 60s plus, Banish, he's watching, all these religious people dancing and dancing and dancing and such joy and dancing and music. And he felt something open up in his heart that had been closed for many, 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 many years. And he felt like he started remembering his youth, where he had also been raised in a Hasidic household. He had also been surrounded by people that looked just like these people. Didn't know they still existed. Look at this. And as he's in this sort of like almost daze, he suddenly hears his name on the loudspeaker. Literally, he's hearing on the loudspeaker, Banish Scheinfeld, go to wherever. He's like, they're calling me? Like, what's going on? So he's like, almost like pulled, and he goes to whatever, site they announced to go to. And he sees when he gets there, a little child and a grandfather. And obviously they weren't calling him, the 60-plus-year-old Banish Scheinfeld. They were calling a little boy whose also name was Banish Scheinfeld. Obviously gotten separated from his grandfather and all the dancing and festivities. He sees the crying little boy, he sees the grandfather, he understands quickly what happened. No, this wasn't him. But he's still like intrigued, like, that's me. I mean, there's not too many Banish Scheinfelds. He didn't know anyone else besides himself. So he goes over to the grandfather. He starts talking to him. Oh, I see your grandson got lost. You found him. Whatever he said, small talk. And then he said, like, do you mind me asking you, why did you name him Banish Scheinfeld? He didn't say, that's my name. And that's sort of a weird question to ask someone. But the man sort of looked at him and said, well, I named him in honor of my brother, Banish, who passed away in the Holocaust. He said, he's looking at that man, and he's like, oh my gosh, this is my brother. He thought I passed away in the Holocaust. I thought he passed away in the Holocaust. And really, the two were brothers. And on that Lag BaOmer, they reunited. And they actually found out that they live about a 10-minute walk from each other. They've lived some 40 years, about 10 minutes apart from each other. The grandfather in Bnei Brak, him in, I believe, Ramat Aviv, about 10-minute walk. And they reconnected, and many things happened after that. But I just, when I heard the story, of course, connected to the time, Friday was Lag BaOmer, the energy of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, the energy of Meron. But I also felt this idea of the energy that he wouldn't give up his name, which wasn't easy for him as a child. You're in a kibbutz. I mean, they know everything. You know nothing. They're modern and Israeli. You're this refugee European, Nebuch, survivor of the Holocaust. But he wouldn't give up his name. He knew he couldn't give up his name. And that name held him for all these years until he was reunited with his brother through his name. So we have things like that in our life. That's, again, the energy of this Torah portion, b'chukosai, a chayk, something engraved in you. Might not be that everything in our relationship to God is like that, but there's certain things that are our soul fortes, our spiritual points of passion. And whatever those things are, we can't give them up no matter what. And whatever they are, and whatever we're living on that level, the people around us get affected by automatically. Even if it doesn't seem like they're getting affected, and even if it doesn't seem like they're noticing, looking, admiring, caring. But what we do, that's us, that you can't separate from us. Those things we never lose, and those things affect everyone around us. Because when we're doing something with such a point of our inner self, it just affects the other people. It goes from our inner self to their inner self. It's true, and it's coming from our core. And it affects people around us on their core as well. So we're talking here specifically about honoring parents, from which I'm speaking about impacting your children so they honor parents when they see how you honor and revere your parents or grandparents or rabbis or teachers or mentors. And there's nothing more powerful than a living example. So when we act in this way, our children or our spouses, the people in our world, see it and get affected, even if they're not telling us they're noticing, and even if they're not telling us they're getting affected. But I'm globalizing it, because it's this week's Torah portion as well, to this concept that it's not just for honoring our parents. For anything that's real in us, it affects people around us. Has anyone here ever seen that where they've been the recipient? Where someone did something or said something or acted in a certain way, and it was so authentic, it was so real, it was such a point of truth, of their truth, that it affected you, even if you never mentioned it to the person who affected you that way. But you really were affected because you really felt that truth in what this person was doing. Anyone can think of something, how they've been affected by someone else, by someone else's point of truth?
I can share something. I think I'm affected like that by my husband's granddaughters, the older ones, because they were raised in Shuva's family. Their mother, she is very observant, but when it comes to clothes, she's not like they were taught in religious schools, and they do what they want to do.
Wow, that's very impressive.
Yeah. I'm always impressed by that, because they are just perfect, very modest clothes.
Wow. For young girls to do that, that's really hard. That's a real big temptation for a young girl.
Yeah.
That's very impressive. So their truth has affected you, and maybe you've tried to upgrade yourself, or just you were inspired, you were impressed by it.
Maybe it had an effect on me too. Yeah. because I'm trying to be as good as I can. This is
Wow. That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. That's beautiful to be inspired by your granddaughters. That's really, 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 really beautiful. It's beautiful, beautiful example. Beautiful. Very special. I loved Rachel's example. I thought that was so precious, envisioning young girls, inspiring her with modesty. That's very, very precious. But I don't believe she's the only one that's ever encountered someone's point of truth. And it does affect us. It really does. And our point of truth affects the people around us as well, which of course would have been the other question to ask, but I didn't. If you've seen how your point of truth has affected your spouse or your children or your mother or friends or people in your world, because I'm sure it goes in both directions. All of us have been affected by other people, inspired by their points of truth, their points of like, this is them no matter what. And we also, our light also shines out and affects people. And sometimes, of course, we're not aware. And sometimes we find out later. And I don't know if these granddaughters know that they're inspiring Rachel to try to upgrade. I don't know. I didn't ask Rachel if she shared that with them. And sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we find out later, and sometimes we do know. But I'm positive for every single one of us, we've all encountered people whose truth is so strong and so shining that it does affect us. And I'm sure our light has affected many, many, many people. If we're privy to it or not, I have no doubt that our light affects others as well.